Greetings and welcome to Get the Tea with Buta. I'm your host, Buta Biberaj, and today, as usual, we have Nick Gothard, the man behind the scenes. We hope you've had a good week, and we hope that today's conversation will be one that will be enlightening as well as uplifting. I have the pleasure to have my very good friend, Pastor Michelle. Pastor Michelle is an individual in our community who we see everywhere. She is a person who is uplifting, supportive, and is always looking for a way to lend a hand to someone who has a need. This past year, Pastor Michelle had her own family challenge. You may have heard in the community that her son, Fitz, passed away from a drowning accident. We are here today to talk about what that experience has been for Pastor Michelle in the different roles and different responsibilities that she has. And also to be able to share that that was a community loss and one that we would always say to her and her family that we're here for you and we're here with you. Welcome, Pastor Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me, Buta.
It is my absolute pleasure.
I love you.
Okay, I love you as well. So we're going to have a tough conversation,
Yes, ma'am.
tough subject, but please understand all and the questions or the comments that I make do come from a place of love.
Sure.
I don't know any greater challenge that you will have experienced or a parent can experience than that you experienced last year. I'm going to ask you, and you choose how to respond to this question. How did you come to learn about the crisis situation that Fitz found himself that evening?
June the 4th, at sometime around 7 o'clock or so, I was, my husband and I were in the kitchen. We were cooking, and we were cooking a special dinner that day. Obviously, I am not useful in the kitchen. And then my husband cooks fabulous dinners, but this particular day, it was a special dinner because Fitz had just gotten his uniform from Harris Teeter. He had gotten his a badge, and so even though he had been working at Harris Teeter for 3 weeks, it was official. And he had come in from work, had done maybe about 6 hours that day, and he had come in around the 3:45-ish hour, and he was flashing his shirts and he was so excited about it. And then we had some conversation. It was around the time we were doing the march. As a matter of fact, I had just finished watching George Floyd's funeral. And so we were planning the marches, the NAACP marches, Black Lives Matters marches, and Fitz was very emphatic about what exactly were we doing? Were we just protesting or did we have a purpose? So he spent about an hour schooling me on how to plan an effective protest and make sure we had our ass together. And then he whisked off and he went to the Goose Creek to meet his friends at River Creek. Initially, I got up like any parent would, and when I heard the door open, I ran to the door and I looked out, and Fitz had his shirt on, he had his swim shorts on, he had his Bob Marley book bag on, and his earphones in his ear, and he was skipping like he always kind of skipped with his little happy walk. And I thought to open up the door and say, Fitz, get back in here. But it was the day before school was out. And so I said, the kid is happy. He just got his big break. Let him go out and have some fun. It's the day before school is out. And literally, probably about 2 hours later, an hour and a half later, his friends came to my doorstep, and there was a loud, bang on the door. It sounded, ominous, to be honest with you, because nobody that knows you, that was either a police knock or a knock that something desperate, someone needed desperate help. And when we opened up, they said, Pastor, I'm sorry to tell you, Fitz has been in a horrible accident. And I was like, okay.
And you knew these boys to be his friends?
Yeah, one of his friends was, Cole. I love him so much. I knew Cole, but they were standing there, which I thought was very peculiar, with an adult that I had never seen before. Mm. And his name was Dunn Shea. And Mr. Shea said, Pastor Michelle, I would, you're gonna have to get to the hospital quickly. I'll take you. I'll drive you. Immediately, Buta. I'm an old Pentecostal girl. I know you Muslim, but I'm an old Pentecostal girl, and I fell to the floor and I started praying. You know what I mean?
So you knew it.
Oh yeah, I knew that something bad had happened to my boy, but I did not believe, and I still don't believe that it was something that God, in His infinite wisdom and His sovereignty, couldn't just fix. And so, I prayed. I went up the steps, and I told you I'm an old Bible thumping Pentecostal. I went to get Bible. I went to get oil. I have read the stories and believed them of Jesus doing miracles. I have read the stories of the prophets doing miracles, and so I was unafraid of what the news that they were giving me because I know that my God works. So went to the hospital.
Did you take your husband with you and your daughter, or just you?
So, we live in the age of phones, cell phones, right? So, what happens? They knock on the door. My daughter comes out because I told you this knock was very ominous. It was loud, and, so my daughter comes out of her room with what? Her cell phone, because there are an appendage, right? So, she comes out of her room and immediately she starts taping. So, Anna actually has a recording which I have never listened to. But she has a recording of exactly what was said. Um, and then, so no, I didn't take Anna because they said it was really serious. I made arrangements for her to go to a neighbor, and I actually, for Delaware, I left him at home because he was still cooking. And I said, let me go and assess the situation. Let me just go see. Um, and I did. I didn't want, my husband, everybody has their, um, your spouse, right? And I know my hubby. He loves his kids. And if there was anything that could have been done or any way I could have shielded him from that direct impact, hurt, I was going to try to do it and fix it up, right? So I'm going to pray Fitz back to glory or back, I'm going to do something. A miracle is going to happen, right? So we went to the hospital. It was just Dunn, Shay, and myself. This man was a stranger. I didn't even know his name at that time. Wow. Not only was he a stranger, he looked peculiar. And he was saying things that were very inconsistent with the way I believed. So he was like, listen, I'm praying. I'm an old Pentecostal. So I'm praying, oh Lord, please have mercy. Oh Father God, there's nothing too hard for you. Oh God, you said by your stripes are healed. I'm quoting scripture, we pray. And he starts to say, well, yes, I understand what you're saying, but if God doesn't do it, Pastor, what if God doesn't do it? Wait a minute. Faith and fear. I'll get out this car and run to the hospital before I let you put that on us. And, it was something because he had obviously seen a lot more than I did. He knew how long Fitz was there. He knew that there was a slim chance of survival. And so he was trying to get me prepared for if in case the miracle didn't happen. And hindsight, I appreciate that. On that day, I did not. I felt like everybody needed to be on the same team, team Jesus, team miracle, team get up Fitz, let's go home, When we got to the hospital, we went in together, me and this stranger. Did I mention that he was white?
No.
Okay. So this stranger, Fitz was the only black person back there at the River Creek at that time. So this guy, Dunn Shade, walks in with me and we are holding hands. I never seen a man in my life. We're holding hands, we sit down, and the doctor's coming back and forth. First of all, we had to wait a long time for Fitz to even arrive. And then, yeah, we waited maybe about what, somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes.
Do you know what the cause of that was?
They were working on him. They were working
At
on him
Goose Creek.
at Goose Creek. They were working on Fitz. And so I have no idea what continued to be the delay, but I thought that was strange that they got there. That means Don Shay had already come to my house. It took me some time to gather, to
Right.
get there, Um, they continued to work on him. They came back, gave us several reportings. Fitz had a light pulse. We're trying to get his pulse up. We're going to continue to work on him. They did that maybe 3 or 4 times. And then I remember the doctor coming in and giving us a report, and she acknowledged Dunn and said, "Is Dunn your husband?" Because at this time they wanted me to go back. They said sometimes if the parents would go back, that the kid would hear their voice and kind of come to. So I said, "Hey, is this, the father?" And Don Shay looked at me and said, "Yes." This stranger, oh, white guy, whom I've never seen before, he said yes. So we got a running joke that he's Fitz's dad,
That's
right? And so, as sad as that day was, there was so many special things that happened that day. There were 400 kids gathered in a parking lot praying, and it didn't matter, that Fitz was black or that maybe some of those kids didn't even know him. It was the whole community coming together, praying and believing that God will do something. And then, when we got the news that Fitz had transitioned, then what do we do now? So the community had to uh, kind of, digress, right, from prayer, but not from faith. And then the prayer changed from God, heal Fitz, God, bring him through, to Lord, um, heal the parents, heal this family, bring them through. And that continued from that day until today. You can feel the prayers and the love of the community, and that continues to kind of lift us.
When you were mentioning the kids in the parking lot, because I know when I drove to the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what that was about. Because they were
When you saw them, did you see them?
Yes,
Okay.
because I went to park the car because you had to park in the garage and then walk up to the hospital part.
Okay.
And it was a bunch of high school age kids, and they would just gather together. And as I said, I didn't know what their purpose was in support of Fitz or what they were there for, because I just had not put the pieces together. So when I come upon that, it was amazing the amount of young people there were. Their parents were all kind of like in the periphery. So they
Okay.
allowed the kids to
Yes.
be together and to kind of take some solace with one another. And it was amazing to just see that it happened so organically. Like it just happened. It was nobody putting it together and coming in. It just occurred.
Yeah.
And then I also remembered, and I don't know if you remember the weather that night.
Yeah. The stormy weather.
It was stormy. It was
Yeah.
like violent
Oh,
in a way
yes.
without being violent.
Oh, yes.
A lot of rain, thunder,
Yeah.
lightning,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
was, but it didn't bother anybody.
No, it didn't deter the crowd at all.
No.
They stood there, and the adults and members of our church, Holy and Whole, they stood in position in front of that hospital, and they prayed. They were soaked.
Mm-hmm.
The saints were soaked, and they prayed. And the children and everybody was just the parents praying, and they were just together as one. I have never seen anything like that in my entire life. Obviously, I've seen pictures, right, by
Right.
now. They've given me pictures, and it's just the most beautiful thing, um, organic thing that I've ever seen. And guess what? It stayed.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't a one night thing. We came together as a community, and we are staying ing together.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, in your pastor role, you've had to try to give comfort to individuals in their time of loss. When you are doing that for someone else, what is going through your mind to try to be able to bring that from within you and to share that with that person in need?
So rather than trying to be the preacher at that moment, I try to be the pastor. And the pastor doesn't need to give a sermon. The pastor just sits and just allow people to be, just to show strength in terms of unity and solidarity, and to serve. And so that is my function. Oftentimes, when you see me responding to death, I'm there to serve. I'm there to hug. I am there to um, shuttle if I need. I'm there to find the kids so I can get them together and allow them to start working through this process, to show them love and support, and to stand with the family. So I don't do a lot of scripture quoting or trying to be pastoresque and philosophical, or a great theologian at that point. I am just a humanitarian that understands that everybody has pain, and everybody will come to a point where we have to deal with death. Yeah.
Now, flipping that experience, you're now the mom who's lost her son.
Hmm.
What words or what comfort did you receive from an individual that allowed you to have some of that peace as much as you could in the moment?
So my comfort came, um, let me be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in trouble, and obviously, as the president of the NAACP, I have to respond rapidly to immediate issues all the time. So I know exactly who to call. I know exactly who to call. And when this happened, I knew exactly who to call, even though it was my case. And three people, I didn't call them, I just called one person to tell three. I said, let me get Sheriff Chapman, let me get Chief Brown, and make sure I get Easton McDonald. And, I wanted to make sure that in terms of any investigation, or any support that our family would need, that they would be there to help us. It was fantastic because those men, all three of them, stood beside my husband. I did not tell Delroy what had happened to his son. That was a Chief Brown um, opportunity, and Easton McDonald, who happens to be Jamaican. And so, of course, Delroy is Jamaican, so they understand. And also, Sheriff Chapman stood beside our family. And so, you know, the support that I received was just everybody being there. And it was nothing that could have been said. Fitz was gone. My baby was gone. And nobody tried to be super deep. And I appreciate that. And, the next morning I woke up and the sidewalks were full. My driveway were full. They had tents up and, greeting. And, I looked outside of my window and I had politicians handing out water. They weren't asking for votes. They were just literally trying to be supportive. You were there. It was the most awful thing ever. But if we could just stand with people, we don't have to do anything. We could just show our love, support, and solidarity by our presence. And that's what I remember the most, and that's what I appreciated.
And I never would wish this upon anybody, but being a witness to that, it was amazing how the community came around and supported you. It was amazing on so many levels because of the fact that no one coordinated it per se.
No.
But then you had people who coordinated the events,
Right.
So they came in and people found a role
Yes.
that they could play
Yep.
to be in support of you.
Yes. Yes.
Your daughter Anna, how old is she now?
She's 13.
Okay. Who told her?
So when we realized that we were losing Fitz, at some point I had to make a decision to go get Anna. So I sent for her, and Chair Randall actually told Anna,
Mm.
and I could hear her. I was in a room with Fitz, and I could hear her wailing from her belly. Fitz and Anna were very, very close, as you heard at the memorial service and funeral. She called him partner in crime.
She did.
She did, right?
Yeah.
And so, it, you know, it was devastating. Um, but Anna is very resilient, and after some time, Anna said to me, I asked her, I said, Anna, how are you dealing with this? Because, after some time, maybe a couple of months, by August, you know, she wasn't crying every day. I was still crying. I said, Anna, how are you dealing with this? And she says, Mom, you and I had a different role with Fitz. My role was to be sister. My role was to be his partner in crime. My role was to have as much fun as we could possibly have. I didn't have any issues with disciplining him. It didn't matter if he didn't cut his hair, if he didn't do anything. I didn't have to chastise him about his grades or anything. When he snuck out the house, I let him right back in. So, she was like, all we have is good memories. And on the other hand, you got to deal with, you know, arguments and stuff. And so,
At times, did you feel almost like she was taking care of you in your grief?
um, I tried to be honest with you. The first month, I was just hopeless and helpless, to be honest with you. So I couldn't even mother. Um, but then, I realized she was checking on me too much, and that's not her responsibility. So I had to pull it together, at least, you know, for a while.
Right.
I had to give myself some hours, because I didn't think in that moment that, you know, that would be the healthiest thing for her to be worrying about me. So,
Have you been able to discuss with her grieving process to be able to afford her the opportunity to pull from your strength as well and
so,
see how she can do it?
so Anna is something. So we talked about the grieving process. We could talk about counseling. She went to see a couple of counselors, and this is what she said. She said, "Mom, listen, I don't particularly care for introducing new people to Fitz, telling the Fitz story to people that don't know him, because that hurts. I find it helpful when people know something about Fitz, and then we can exchange in that way." And so she decided that she was going to, just work with us. She's going to continue to pray with us, and she was going to work through this process. She said, "Now, if something happens in a couple of months, I need counseling, then let's find it." And I said, "That's fair, no problem." I said, "What about in a couple of years? Maybe, you get ready to start going to Riverside and you need it. Would you let me know?" And she says, "Absolutely." I was like, "Because sometimes grief hits you in, waves. It may not happen all right now. It could happen some years later. It could even happen into your adulthood, or when you have kids, right? You start thinking, oh, is something going to happen to my kid?" So, we are just very close and very open, and I'm so grateful for that.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you have her, and then obviously that she has you.
Oh, yeah.
You and Dell. Obviously,
Now
husband
you're
and
about to
wife.
get deep.
No, yes, I am. Your husband and wife, but you're also parents.
Yes.
Your relationship with Fitz was different than his relationship with his dad.
Right.
Uh, both of you lost a child. Would it be fair to say that you've experienced and reacted to that loss differently?
Obviously, right? So
In which ways?
and men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? So, so there's something, the statistics of couples breaking up after, a death of a child, they're grim,
Mm-hmm.
right? So 60% of families end up in a divorce because of loss of a child. For Delroy and I, this was something that we did. Finally, that particular night when Fitz passed, when we were finally able to get in the bed, um, we weren't able to sleep. So we're sitting there, we're staring at the ceiling, and it's like, can you believe this? Cannot believe it. And we just kept going back and forth with each other. Um, and then I turned to him and said, you know what? No matter what happens, we lost Fitz. We're not going to lose each other, and we're not going to lose our love. We're not going to lose our love for Fitz. We're not going to lose our love for our kids, and we're not going to lose our love for each other. We made a pact that night, and I'm so happy that we did that. Right, so we were on the same team. Besides, we were both home. Right. You know, thank God. Because Delroy is on the road. So if he was on the road, and this is what he came home to, that would be a whole different ball game. That could be many fights. Like, what were you doing? What happened? You let him out. You didn't go to the door to take him back. Right. It was very helpful that we were both there and we got the news together and all of that. So there's no blame here. And so we were able to just move as a collective unit and say, all right, we're going to have to find out what happened. We're going to have to give him the best memorial service and homegoing service that we can. We got to find a way to incorporate the community, and then we got to find a way to heal. Then we got to find a way to heal. And lastly, we got to find a way to give back. And that's what we've been doing.
Excellent. When you were talking about the benefit of both of you being at home, so I'm going to turn it a little bit.
Okay.
Because I would suggest a reaction like that as to why did you let him go? Why did you do this? Is a place of anger. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's not necessarily that I'm trying to blame you, but I need answers. Like, right. How the heck did this happen?
Right.
So I need you to explain to me, how did you let it happen?
Right.
Like, so from that perspective, and it being a natural progression, someone's grieving.
Right.
Have you found yourself at times kind of working through those emotions where you wake up in the morning, some days you got this, other days you're like, what the heck is going on?
Right.
Have you had those roller coaster emotional rides?
Every single day.
So,
but
go ahead.
Honestly, what I would, if I was on the outside, I would think that I would be, and maybe initially I was recounting, why didn't I just open the door and call them back? Right?
Right.
And I went through that for a couple of weeks of all the times. Like, I have no shame. Right. I would open the door and say, Fitz, come on back.
Right.
But that particular day, I literally felt like at some point you got to let the boy grow up. This is the day before, he becomes a senior. Your mommy can't be hollering up the, streets. Some Fitz, come back. And so that went on for a couple of weeks, right? So you beat yourself up with that. And it was my husband that said to me, no, because if you didn't let him out the front door, he would have gone out the back.
Right.
And we would have been in here cooking and wouldn't even know he was gone. Right. So, nothing could have stopped what happened that day. Not one of our actions that could have stopped what happened that day. So we're not going to beat ourselves up and we're not going to beat each other up because, we parent well and we parent well together. In other words, I have very little to think about in hindsight that I could have done differently with Fitz because I gave Fitz my all and I'm giving Anna my all and I gave Adrian my all and I even give my all to Delroy.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now you are a person of faith.
Yes.
And you have a strong religious belief.
Yes.
Ever question God as to what his plan was by this happening? I love you.
I love you. So, okay, let me take these earphones out so I can hear. That was a tough question.
And it's not from a bad place, right?
No, it's a good place. And I would be disingenuous if I said, Buta, I never questioned God. I never said, why did this happen to us? What I didn't question was who God is and his ability to do miracles at any time. So my questions were like this, like, why did this happen, God? Here I am with my oil, water, and Bible, and I got the tongues ready. Right. I'm ready to go raise the dead in here. And guess what? We got 400 kids. Do you know how many converts we could have? Do you know how many people that would accept this Jesus Christ, this miracle working God? Ay, I thought, hey, this is a lost opportunity. And then God had to deal with me and say, no, the miracle was not in me raising Fitz from the dead or healing Fitz so he didn't die. The miracle was sometimes you don't get what you want. Sometimes you don't get what you deserve. Sometimes you don't get what you pray for. Sometimes you don't get, the best of what the possible outcomes could be. But will you still love and trust the God that you know is the creator of heaven and earth? Will you still trust and love that same God that you preach about every single Sunday? And the answer for me was overwhelmingly yes. Just like I know God would never leave or forsake me, I made that commitment and doubled down. I'm not going to forsake you. In other words, we've dated people who's treated us terrible, right? It's true. You date people and they don't treat you that wonderful.
Right.
But you don't break up with them. You hang in there with them.
Give them every benefit.
You give them every benefit of the doubt.
Right.
And so for me, God gave me, a good talking to, one day. And it was literally about how many things have I done for you? Oh my gosh. The list was long, Buta. The list was long. The things that God have done for me, saved me from, calamity. And, I've had a pretty great life. There's only one thing that I know that God did not do, and that was what Fitz. How can I break up with God for that? So, yeah, it's okay to question why, but question who God is, nah, I'm good.
So I will tell you what my fears were.
Okay.
Because at the time that this happened, I thought this would break your faith.
Woo!
I did, just because you are such an advocate for religion, you're such an advocate for God, that I didn't know if you would get to the point where you can reconcile that and say, okay, look at the things that I do. Because anytime we have a challenge like that, sometimes in our minds we view it as a punishment. What do you punish me for? What did I not do that you asked me to do?
Right.
And that was my biggest fear,
right,
for you in that moment.
So I understand that, and you are right. And I think a whole bunch of people, whether in Loudon and outside of Loudon, was really concerned about. I get that, and that is a legitimate concern because it could have happened. But two things. Number one, my father kind of prepared me for this. All my life, I've been prepared for this moment. Wow. And to be honest with you, this is the first time that I've kind of spoken about it, especially on camera. But when my dad was, I'm not sure, it was before he migrated to America. So I guess this May was about the 50s sometime. He had a brother, and his brother was 17, and his brother died.
Oh, my.
His brother, I don't know if he had an aneurysm or something, but he had gone to church earlier. He came back and said he had a headache, and that was it. He was in the room laying down, and all of a sudden he was just gone. And my father actually told us the story several times in a way of looking backwards with deep regret. Yes. And so this is what my dad said. My dad said, "Hey, um, when Winston died, I did not. I was so grief stricken that I abandoned what I knew as our practice as a pastor." So he said, I was just weeping, I wasn't praying. I didn't try to do anything. I didn't try to resurrect him, nothing. I didn't try to, that's what my dad said. So he's going on, and this is a story that I've heard several times growing up. You hear what I'm saying?
Right.
So this is not a far from my mind thing. So when it happened, I ran up those steps. I said, I bet you I'm not going to miss this chance, because my dad had said that. And that was his one regret. And I said, oh, no, it's not going to happen to me. However, God's in charge of all of that. When we live, how we live, or how long we live, and when we pass. He's in charge of all of that. And so, for me, I had a preview, not of fits, but of a situation and how to handle that as a parent and a pastor. And so I'm comfortable in the way that I held on to my faith in that time. And I certainly wasn't going to throw it up in the air just because I didn't get what I want. Because that would negate what we really believe as Christians. So Christians believe this is not the end. Fitz's death means that his time on earth is over, but he has another time in eternity that we'll even get to spend together if I do the work here to get where he's going. And so I got work to do. I don't have time.
Don't screw this up.
No, don't mess this up. You see what I'm saying? So that's the issue. So if I was ever gonna turn back, it's not gonna be now. I got to get to heaven to see Fitz. I got to get to heaven to see, God. So I just, I can't give up now. Got to keep going.
Your faith then has been a very strong foundation for you and a strong support for you to be able to manage this loss. Have you been able to support? You mentioned Adrian. Adrian is your son, Delroy's son as well. Delroy's son, your stepson. He lost his brother, and I know there's an age gap between the two of them.
10 years.
Yep. So, how have you been able to support Adrian? And just by way of background, Adrian was not living in a home at the time that Fitz passed away.
No, he was living in D.C. In fact, he had only moved out 6 months earlier.
Wow.
So Adrian had a tremendous weight of guilt. If he had stayed home, Fitz probably wouldn't have gone there because he and Fitz would have been working out or doing something. Right. So he felt a tremendous amount of guilt, and he had to take time off of his job, and we're all healing together.
Mm-hmm. And that with healing and grief, even within the same family, it's not the same process.
It's not the same process. In fact, one of the things that we kind of decided as a family is we need to be together. So Adrian, gave up his lease, and he moved back home. And so he was able to stay with us, watch us. We babysit him, he babysit us. Sometimes and we were able to have dinner together and just share in all of the decision making and everything that we had to do up until this point, right? So, and I mean everything, whether that is working with the investigation, whether that means getting through the process of autopsy, whether that meant, dealing with, the case with Loudoun County. There's a lot of things that you have to do. Scholarships, how do we give something back? And Adrian was right there making decisions along. We treat Adrian like a third parent for Fitz. He has more than sibling cred, because he and Fitz were 10 years apart. He actually taught Fitz how to walk. And so, yeah. He was at Belmont in the 6th grade when I had Fitz. And I remember he would race home every evening from school. And he would hold his brother's hand and just, walk with him until he was able to walk on his own. And that was Adrian's commitment. I remember that day, Adrian was just holding Fitz's hand. That's awesome. Always been his thing. I'm going to hold my brother's hand.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about having three parents in the household. Does that mean then Anne is outnumbered 3-1?
No,
So I'm thinking my money's still on her.
Right. So Anna is managing all of us,
Exactly.
right? So we three parents to Fitz. We not three to Anna, so she's Queen Bee. But Anna's a little princess girl, and she, and we treat her as such. But she's very much the life of the house. She's our little flower that we're enjoying watching grow.
Fitz, based on prior conversations and having heard you speak on other matters, you have shared a story that Fitz has directed, educated you into what your function and your role should be in your relationship with Loudoun County.
Huh.
What did he say to you?
So Fitz and I had a running argument, and it was always about Loudon, right? So I am very much a person where I enjoy kids best when they are soaring and spreading their wings. In other words, I don't want you here at 46 in my basement.
Right.
And so Fitz had this love for Loudon. Like Loudon was the best thing since sliced bread. Oh, Mom, listen, the people of Loudon are great. The kids are great. Everything's great in Loudon. He just viewed Loudon as the greatest place in the world. And I would always say, where else have you lived?
I know, like that you comparing this.
Yeah, what is your comparison? And he didn't need one. He just knew in his soul that Loudon was the best. And I didn't have that belief until Fitz passed. And I saw the way that people loved unconditionally and sustainably, right? So for the first 100 days, Buta, I received flowers every single day on my doorstep. 100 days, I received flowers, cards, gift cards, anything, food. I mean, one day somebody left food and the squirrels ate it. I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, please don't leave food on the doorstep. But it was just an outpouring of love like I've never seen. Fitz was right. These are the greatest people on the earth. That doesn't mean that we don't have problems. That doesn't mean that we don't disagree. But at the time where we need each other the most, Loudon people will come together. They certainly will. And so it's been great watching that happen. And my role in that is to continue to bring light into dark situations, continue to empower and inspire people to live their best lives and operate in their best, as their best selves. So, and that's my job. My job is just, I'm inspirer in chief.
Well, in your inspiration and your job and function as the chief, you have a lot of little Indians. Because I see how the kids from Riverside,
yes,
how supportive they've been of you and of the family. Did you ever expect that they would come together for you in that way?
I didn't know those kids.
Not funny.
I didn't know a single one of them.
Right.
The only one that I knew was Christian. I knew Cole. I knew Max in passing, but had not spent time with any of them outside of passing and seeing each other at different LCPS functions. I didn't know the kids at all. I was shocked. When they converged on my doorstep and would not leave and haven't left, I was just like, how am I going to know your names? This is what they told me. They said, Pastor Michelle, you lost a son, but you gained many more. This is all the football team. And it was at least 20 boys. And I said, how am I going to remember your names? I know their names. I know everything about them. I know what school they're going to. I know them personally. I know if they got a girlfriend. They cook. I know everything about them. And I hope that I would know more over time because this relationship is a bond that is forever.
Yeah. It's amazing because I've seen the times when they've celebrated their own personal achievements or events, they found a way to include you.
Buta, I didn't know if that was, I don't know. I still don't know how to think about that, because they were determined not to let me miss anything that I should have seen in Fitz, not to allow me to miss any senior experience. They say you're going to experience it all. So whether that is FOCO, that's fake homecoming, HOCO, fake prom. I don't know what they call them, but they homecoming, senior night, prom, they all would come. The one of the most memorable times is, as a parent, you feel robbed almost. I mean, the time that the parent wants the most is the time that senior year. That's it. You dump all the money in the kid.
Yeah, exactly right. A lot of experiences.
And all the love and all the experiences. And the payback is to see them walk across that graduation stage. And, one of the you have the other buildup of experience along the way, homecoming, prom, all of that. So I was hoping that I would, dress Fitz for homecoming. See him pin a corsage on a girl, see old corny Fitz,
joke him a little bit.
Yeah, see how that worked out. And I didn't get it, but what I did get, and one of the days that was really special was, I think it was their prom, and one of the students, Michael Banks, came running up the sidewalk. All the other guys were there, and his tie was undone. He didn't have his belt on right. I mean, it looked like his suit pants was up one leg and down the other. He was not right. He reminded me so much of Fitz. And he says, anybody know how to tie a tie? And with tears streaming down my face, I said, I do. And I tied his tie just like I would tie it for Fitz. I am blessed for that experience, and I love them for allowing me to have that. Those are the things that make you bitter and not better, when you feel robbed and when you feel, left out in that sort of way, and when you have to force yourself to celebrate others because you've lost something great. But it was natural for me to scream and shout and get excited for others because they carried me along with them. It was beautiful. Yeah.
Beyond just supporting your family from a day to day or an event to event perspective, boys also did something else to allow the legacy of Fitz to continue on.
They started Justice for Fitz.
What was that about?
So Justice for Fitz was a series of policy changes that needed to be enacted, and some of the list is still yet to be done. So they are recruiting people to work on those policy changes for this year. But it was a list of simple, common sense things that could help save lives. Simple, common sense steps and policy changes that could increase public safety. I'll give you an example. So along the Goose Creek, it was hard for the call taker to determine where Fitz was located. It would have been helpful just like on the highway where you have street markers that tell you, oh, you are at, exit 37 and it's, 1/4 of a mile or whatever. We need those markers around along the creek so that we could see, exactly where we are on the creek. So, that's something that they were working on. There was also an opportunity at the state level, which two of the Fitz's classmates joined. It was the 911 commission, and so reform commission. So that was the commission at the state level that would investigate the 911 issues surrounding Fitz's death. And these guys, they met on Thursdays of every week, and they gave it their own. They gave it their all. They worked hard. Many of their suggestions the commission took, and they're working to enact it. And some of the suggestions are left in the pipeline for next year. I think those guys are going to continue to be on that commission even while they're in college. So it's fantastic.
That is awesome. Now, did they do anything at the high school to further honor Fitch, and then how did that happen? Like, how did they actually complete that task?
So the night Fitz died, there was a senior, a graduating senior, class of 2020. And that gentleman said that he was literally in his bathroom, bawling his eyes out. And he said he just started praying, God, what can I do? And he said he just had this overwhelming feeling that you need to start a petition. And so he started a change.org petition for to have the stadium named after Fitz. So the Riverside Stadium had never had a name since it was built, and almost 7,000 people signed that petition, along with classmates writing letters to the Loudoun County School Board, petitioning them. They actually spoke at the school board on behalf of Fitz and having the name changed, and they did it. They actually got the job done. They wanted to make sure that they changed the name. What was so poignant about that is these kids had to study policy. They had to study policy. So there is a policy that tells you, how to name sort resources.
Okay.
And they push back on that policy, and they use that policy, and knowing the intricacies of it. Since the stadium had been named for Fitz, the policy obviously has been changed. The policy now reads that they can't name it over a person if the death hadn't been 2 years,
Okay.
and they don't really favor students, right? So Fitz is the first African American student to have a stadium and field named after him.
Wow.
And so it was amazing that they would get that done, and they would get it done in their senior year. It probably took about from June to when school got in August, September, October, and November. It was done by November.
That's just amazing, and I love the fact that one, they came up with the idea,
Yes,
and then they put the sweat equity behind it to make it happen.
yes, policy 6130. Yeah, policy 6130. They did. And it's funny because this naming is not for forever, that they have to re up every 10 years.
Wow.
And so this is the commitment of the class of 2021 that every 10 years for their reunion, they're going to file the paperwork to have it renamed again or keep the name as Fitz.
That's amazing. Now, when you're watching these boys who this year graduated, and you see them moving on to the next chapter in their life, how do you envision Fitz having been at this point? Like, what do you think he would have been? Cap gown done. Mom, I'm finished. Here's my next step.
So it would have been either college or military. So 3 weeks before Fitz passed, he had contacted a Air Force recruiter who told him, Fitz, you're not even 17 yet. And so call me back on your birthday. I can't do early entry or whatever, delayed entry until 17.
Right.
So he was very much a patriotic guy. I could see him going into the military or going to college. He was a smart kid. He could have, picked his, path. But I very much could feel, even in his absence, his presence there. One of the great scholars of the class of 2021 is the football captain named Will Butts. Will Butts' GPA is off the charts. Very, very smart guy. I'm watching the processional of, of the graduating class, and I see Will coming out, Buta, with an 8x10 picture of Fitz, and he's walking proud, chest up, and he has this picture, and he's holding it, and it is Fitz. And I say, "Hey, Will," and he says, "Look, Pastor." He says, "I'm putting this in Fitz's chair." And so he goes and puts Fitz's picture in a chair that they had left empty for Fitz. I know.
You're killing me.
I know. I know. I know. It's tough. It's tough. But when you see kids that have so much genuine love and so much hope and so much resilience, you can't help but to get behind them. You can't help to push. This year, in Fitz's honor, we gave out scholarships. We gave out 28 scholarships, totaling $43,000. 25 of those scholarships went directly to Riverside students who experienced the most trauma. We had several groups of students that we recognized. One group was just the 10 students that was back there with Fitz on the day he died. And those are our students, our heroes and valors. And so they received $1,000 scholarship. We celebrated the advocate students that we have, those students that made sure that the name was changed for the stadium. They received $2,500. There were other students that made community impact, whether they painted his parking spot to make sure that they remembered him and nobody could park in Fitz's parking spot. All of those things made a huge difference. And, in all, they received about $43,000 in scholarships and prayers along the way, that they would go and keep Fitz's memory alive by doing well. By doing well. That's it.
Well, that's a great investment in the community,
Yes.
in his name and in his honor.
Yeah.
I have no doubts that that's going to reap so many benefits for our community.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're having experienced this loss yourself. Has it changed how you end up um, dealing with individuals in your church or your community as to how you end up assisting somebody who's going through such a loss?
Absolutely.
How?
Right. So sometimes there is a temptation to over spiritualize. No, I don't think that you're over spiritualizing. I think people have a tendency to be very religious around um, death and grief. And sometimes people just need you to be with them in that moment. It doesn't require for you to say things.
Right.
You quoting scripture to me, Buta, at that point, I know everything that the Bible said. I know everything that the Bible said, and I can repeat it to you backwards, actually. And so it's not helpful. What is helpful is the times that you sat on my couch and held my hand. The times that maybe we've just driven around where I could catch my breath. Be human. Connect on a human level, right? So if you can't respect people in their lives, you can't respect them in their deaths. And so we have to learn, you can't fix death. You can't fix it. No, nothing that you can say can fix it. But you can be with me in this moment and help me through it. And so I've learned to better pastor people in the ministry of silence and presence.
For a pastor and a lawyer? How the heck do you get there?
Love. I love you too much to give you a cliche. I love you too much to, give you something that you already know. It's redundant because you're already thinking it. I'm trying to pray, and quote scriptures to myself. You just add to the misery. You ain't helping me. And so just be quiet and love people and be helpful and wait for their commands and social cues. There's a lot of social cues that is picked up on without speaking. I remember for the first 48 hours, I wouldn't eat. I remember the first 48 hours, I wouldn't eat. And so I needed, people, can I get you anything? Can I get you, the answer is always no, because we don't want anything. And then I remember somebody saying, she has not eaten.
Excuse me.
Somebody said, she hadn't eaten. Pastor has not had a thing to eat. So find yourself being useful by, picking up on social cues, be a servant. Whether that means you have to wait tables, as a pastor's, you come over to visit with people and people have to wait on you, you get up and get somebody a drink out the fridge. And I've just learned how to be, present in that moment with people versus preaching in that moment with people.
As we close out our conversation today, what advice would you give to a parent or someone who's undergoing a fresh loss of a significant other, be it a parent, a child, just somebody that is literally part of their life in its most basic relationships?
Um, give yourself grace to grieve and room to breathe. Grace to grieve and room to breathe. Grief is a journey, and it is not measured by your faith in Christ. It is not measured grief because the Bible. Let me just sorry, beautiful.
Throw in a revision.
But the Bible says, that we don't grieve like others grieve that don't have hope. So the Christian way to grieve is to embrace that grieving process, but to know that there's hope at the end to seeing your loved one again. And so you got to give yourself grace to grieve. Don't feel guilty that, oh, you're grieving too long. It need to be 30 minutes. You only can cry for 10 seconds. Everybody grieves differently. Give yourself the grace to grieve and the room to breathe so that you'll have, stamina for the journey. It's not a race. It's not, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And I'm still, I'm not even a quarter way through. I'm 1/16 of a way through. I got a long way to go, But by the grace of God and good friends and the community and the love and hope, right? So when I see these kids, they give me hope. You know, uh, try to be every day. Try to be better and not bitter. But that's an intentional action because waking up every morning knowing that you've lost your kid, the tendency is to start on that bitter train. But I have to course correct, and I'd encourage people is to take that action towards better versus bitter.
And that's very powerful in the words, but it's also such an amazing goal. So I wish you the best of luck in that journey.
Yeah.
I hope you keep the following in mind. One, maintain hope, and two, know that you are surrounded by love and you and your family are not doing so.
Thank you so much, Buta. I feel it. Some people say, yeah, we love you. We got your back, blah, blah, blah. If nobody ever says another word, if no one ever says, we love you, I got your back, we're right here, Pastor, I feel it times 1,000. Yeah. Love you. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's a lot for you to check up.
Thank you for being part of our conversation today. As we discussed earlier,